On September 21st, 1797, the Ottoman governor of Rumelia, or the European side of the empire, Mustafa Pasha, reported to Sultan Selim III that he, his imperial forces, and the local community were in a dangerous situation that could escalate into a large-scale conflict in the city of Philippe in Bulgaria. The official claimed that he had successfully co-opted the mountain bandit leader Karafazi. He also co-opted his companions and their bands and rolled them up into his own forces. He settled them in the Balkans and said he was on the cusp of ending their 5-year-long reign of pillaging that had devastated much of the region. But Mustafa Pasha then complained that his plans went askew by another Ottoman officer. The governor of Anatolia, Ali Pasha, marched his troops into the outskirts of Philippe and attacked his divisions that included the bandit Karafazi, and completely disregarded Mustafa Pasha's pledges of amnesty given to these bandit leaders and their men. But then the Anatolian governor added insult to injury by doing some of his own pillaging. He indiscriminately plundered properties and slaughtered bystanders. Mustafa Pasha continued his letter and noted that local inhabitants were now talking about how it was his failure to uphold his word of honor of amnesty for the former bandits that led to their suffering. As a consequence, the pardoned bandits and local inhabitants were rumored to be on the verge of a rebellion against the Ottoman Empire. Well, the Anatolian governor, Ali Pasha, wrote his own letter to the Sultan denying all charges. 2 days later, he accused Mustafa Pasha of spreading false rumor about what actually happened in Philippe, and this began a heated exchange of conflicting accounts that drew in governors from all over the empire. Was the Ottoman army indiscriminately attacking people who received amnesty? Were they not doing that? Were inhabitants joining ranks with the bandits? Were the bandits returning to their old lives of plundering? This was getting really confusing. Ali Pasha, the governor of Anatolia, went so far as to charge that not only was Rumelian governor Mustafa Pasha too soft on former bandits and personally bargaining with dangerous men that he couldn't control, but that, according to the local rumor, Mustafa Pasha's administration was in cahoots with these criminals. Ali Pasha wrote further letters stating that only a powerful and trustworthy person like himself could clean up this web of deceit and drain the swamp. Okay, well, who was this bandit leader that they were talking about? Karafazi. Karafazi achieved notoriety for leading a pillaging enterprise that crossed boundaries and spread all over the Balkans, into Bulgaria, into Macedonia, and other places, and recruited many former soldiers. Thousands of veterans were left without work after the Habsburg-Ottoman-Russian War of 1788 to 1792. These soldiers joined the ranks of the bandit Karafazi, and their operations spread throughout the Ottoman Balkans in Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania, Macedonia, Greece, and Turkey. Karafazi had no official title or fixed seat of power, and this is why he hasn't shown up in Ottoman sources until very recently, with the work of such scholars as Tolga Esmer, who is my advisor. But Karafazi operated a powerful mobile bandit network that operated throughout the Balkans. And there's a reason why he doesn't show up in a lot of chronicles, and his story was whitewashed, and that's because of his operation's success and ability to deceive imperial officials time and time again. He was a huge embarrassment to the government. But Karafazi's story demonstrates that there were other players between the provinces in Istanbul, besides local notables and renegade imperial officials. That's because the Ottoman government relied upon bandit networks for different reasons. The leaders of these networks fulfilled important functions in Ottoman politics and government, even if the Ottoman government and other imperial powers labeled such men as irregulars and bandits. So in this episode, we're going to talk about the Ottoman bandit. And as you can see here, this is a confusing subject to talk about because there's not a clear line between bandit and legitimate government representative. In order to explain what I'm talking about, I want to introduce a concept called a monopoly of violence. This is an idea from political science and a core concept of public law, which goes back to Thomas Hobbes' book, Leviathan. And what it means is that the state is the only institution that lays claim to the monopoly on the legitimate use of physical force. So from a government's perspective, you can only kill people legally if you're in the army, if you're a member of the police, if you're an executioner, you're some sort of government official. The government doesn't allow blood feuds or family feuds between clans in the mountains because government representatives aren't doing the killing. Before the modern period, the state did not have a monopoly on violence. For example, in the Middle Ages, private warfare was permitted under certain conditions. A baron or a lord could engage in private warfare. And religious courts had sole jurisdiction over some types of offenses, like heresy or sex crimes. But in the modern era, the state exists wherever a single authority can legitimately authorize violence. The Ottoman Empire didn't get to the point where it had enough control that could maintain a monopoly on violence, and sometimes it used bandit networks for its own ends. The Ottoman government was happy to allow bandits into their ranks when they were useful. For example, the most successful sea captain in Ottoman history was Hayrettin Barbarossa. He was an Ottoman admiral of the fleet who scored major victories for the Ottoman Empire in the 1500s and allowed them to have dominance over the Mediterranean. But before he was a captain, he was a privateer, or some would say pirate, in the Mediterranean, who fought against the Knights Hospitaller, who were based on the island of Rhodes. And I've done previous podcast episodes about the history of the mafia in the United States, in Japan, in many other places. And the point is that even in the modern era, the state doesn't have complete monopoly on violence. The Yakuza in Japan, for example, in many situations exist parallel with the government, and the government of Japan informally gives them jurisdiction over different areas. In fact, that's where the mafia comes from. In Sicily, the Italian government really didn't consolidate control, and when there was a black hole of security for locals, the mafia filled this in. They provided justice to people who asked for it. The lines between legitimate government and illegitimate government had not consolidated, and this is the situation the Ottoman Empire constantly finds itself in.